This is Abby Teleria from Melissa Data, and welcome to today's webinar, Geocoding 101, How to Acquire Location Data to Improve Business Decisions. During today's webinar, we'll review the different levels of accuracy available, from zip code centroid to delivery point, including how to assign lat-long coordinates and much more. We'll also take a look at how geocoding data can be retrieved using Melissa Data's contact zone, and how to leverage parallel processing from within the contact zone environment. What is contact zone? It's powerful data quality software with advanced data integration capabilities. This webinar is part of our ongoing Contact Zone Expert Series. Please join me in welcoming our data quality analyst and MVP channel manager, Joseph Bertito. Before we begin, just some quick notes. We'll have a quick Q&A session at the end, and you'll be able to type in your questions through the GoToMeeting interface. Okay, we've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. Joseph, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Abby. Again, my name is Joseph Vertito, Data Quality Analyst for Melissa Data. And I also manage the Melissa Data MVP network. If that's something that might interest you, please feel free and contact me. My contact information will be shown at the end of this presentation. But basically, this is a network for consultants, speakers, community leaders. So if you do anything like write articles or do any speaking engagements, this might be something of interest to you. So this is actually a network full of other MVPs, and so feel free to leverage that if that's something that interests you. So today I'm actually going to go through geocoding, and this is going to be a very high-level introduction on how Melissa Data does geocoding and how we give you geospatial data and other information tied to that. So what exactly does geocoding mean? Well, quite simply, geocoding is equivalent to geocoordinates. So this is latitude and longitude information that is typically based off of an input address. But of course, you're not limited to just the physical address. You can maybe get a a lat long based off of a phone number, or maybe even an IP address. But again, these locations are typically represented through geocoordinates, which is the latitude and the longitude. So here we can see the lat and long for this address, which is the Melissa Data address, and this is where it will be on the map. So geocoding, just some of the applications of geocoding in case you don't know just quite yet. Of course, geocoding can be used, as we just seen, to determine locations on a map, and this is what most of, or if not all of the mapping companies out there do, like Google or maybe MapQuest. They all base their locations off of lats and longs. This also allows you to do something like a dealer locator. Where's the closest 7-Eleven to my address? You could also do something like, or with the lat and long data, you can also do something like a radius search. Give me all the grocery stores within 5 miles of where I live, something like that. Or maybe something like a dispatching or a routing type of solution where you could figure out, which taxi should go to which house at this time. So just a few high-level applications of what you can do with geocoding and geocoordinates. There are some levels when it comes to geocoding, and this is more or less like a system of narrowing information. And really, the more specific you get when it comes to the levels of geocoding, the more premium that kind of data is. Of course, the more accurate your data is when it comes to geocoding, the more points you have to cover. So that becomes a little bit more premium kind of data. But if we take a look at some of the levels when it comes to geocoding, not everyone, of course, will, or some people will want, or they're going to be okay with a 5-digit zip code centroid, for example, that encompasses a huge area. If they just want to figure out, from a general perspective, which area this person resides, then they can make use of this 5-digit centroid zip code centroid. And this is probably the biggest level of geocoding, or the least accurate level of geocoding that is useful as from what we've seen. Below that, a little bit more or much more accurate would be the 9-digit zip code centroid, which is typically about 6 to 10 households in size. And this is in a more, when it comes to like urban areas, this is typically the size that we've seen, which is about 6 to 10 households, or maybe 1 to 2 blocks. But in more rural areas, this can get actually quite bigger. So a 9-digit zip code in a rural area might actually cover a much bigger area, simply because of the size and population. So less populated an area is, the bigger the 9-digit zip code centroid is. And then we have probably the two best types of geocoding information or geocoordinates that you can get would be the rooftop interpolated data, which is based off of what we call shape files. So these are definitions of shapes in a map. They don't actually give you actual, lat and long coordinates. These are mathematically computed geocoordinates based off of shape files. So, once you know the shape of a certain block, for example, you could do computations and kind of compute for the points themselves. So if they tell you, oh, this end of the road up to this end of the road would be equivalent to from 0 to 100, and this would be the shape of that, then you can do your computations and interpolate that data to get the points. But of course, one level below that, which is the most accurate form of geocoding information, would be the exact location based off of actual data. So this is where you see Google kind of going around and doing their own clicking of locations. So this is actually how they do their individual points of data. So this is, again, the most accurate form of geocoding data, which is rooftop, and then one level above that will be your interpolated data, and then your 9-digit zip code centroid, which is about 6 to 10 households in size, and of course your 5-digit zip code centroid, which encompasses a much huger area. What we've seen so far, because a lot of people actually do, they have geocoding data, but probably the two most popular ones would be geodata coming from Navteq and TomTom. So these are the two biggest providers when it comes to reference data for latitudes and longitudes. But even with these two, they don't even offer the more complete, they don't offer 100% coverage when it comes to lats and longs. But certainly these are probably the two best providers of reference data for geocoding. Now, Melissa Data actually makes use of both of these, and through that we're able to cover about 96% of the entire U.S. And this includes, of course, interpolated data and actual rooftop geocoding. For those that we aren't able to provide information for that, for the rooftop geocoding, the remaining 4 or 5% will actually be brought down at the 9-digit level geocoding. And if not, then we would actually bring that down again to a 5-digit level of geocoding, just to be able to encompass as much addresses or as much locations here in the U.S. So that's pretty much just a few slides I wanted to go through before we actually go through, showing you how to perform geocoding through some of our solutions. And specifically, I want to show you how to do that through our software solution, which is called Contact Zone. Now, this is a expert series for Contact Zone. And for those of you who have not joined us previously in my past webinars, I believe this is the 7th installment. And I've covered a lot of different other topics, from national change of address to matching and deduplication and so on and so forth. So if you're interested to see any of those topics, then all you have to do is go to our website and go under webinars, and here you can see all the expert series for Contact Zone and some of the topics that I've discussed previously in the past. So hopefully this might interest some of you. So just take a look at these, and these are all pre-recorded videos. So again, if you open our Contact Zone tool, and Contact Zone again is our software solution, and it pretty much works very similar to a lot of the ETL tools that you see out there. And by ETL, I mean tools like SQL Server Integration Services or maybe Talent Data Integration. So we built this to kind of mimic that kind of architecture. So once you open the tool itself, you get a screen here. So you got a tutorial, get started if you wanted to do any of that. But right now I'm just going to go ahead and create a new transformation. It's within the transformation where all the work kind of takes place. So I've created a new one, and right now I have a blank palette, which then the first thing I would want to do is, of course, I'd want to specify probably an input database. And again, this is an ETL solution, or this is modeled after an ETL solution, so we're going to try and extract data. We're going to try and do some transformations on it, and then we're going to load all of our results in a separate database. So first thing I want to do is extract some data that I have from a CSV file. And I'm just going to go ahead and browse for some data here. I already have some data here that I've pre-selected. So I'm actually going to select this sample data.csv, and that's pretty much how you connect to a CSV file. You browse for that file itself, and then all you really have to do is click on Get Fields, and it'll automatically detect all of my fields and even try and detect what type of data type it is. So right now it's detecting all of these as strings and have my address, city, state, name, email, and phone numbers. So I'm just going to go ahead and press OK here. And maybe I should have showed you guys what that data looks like. So maybe we can let's actually browse for that file. So the sample data.csv has a few records in it. Just wait for this guy to open. Okay, so we've got, again, typical contact information: address, cities, states, zip codes, emails, and phone numbers. So these are all the data that I have, and I'm just going to go in, or my goal here is, again, to try and show you guys how I would get some geocoding out of that. So over here on the left, you can see we've got a few components available. We've got a contact verify component, which is actually what we're going to use for today. This has our geocoding capabilities. Of course, you've got global verify, which we'll see also in just a second here. IP locator, matchup for matching and deduplication, personator for verifying or identifying people and places, making sure a person lives in that address and has that phone number and whatnot. Pre-sort for pre-sorting, smart mover for NCOA. I have discussed most of these in my past webinars again, so just go ahead and view those when you have the time. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and map the CSV file into my contact verify component. And what that does is it basically passes all of the rows in that sheet, all 50, I believe, yeah, all 50 rows, 51 rows into my contact verify. And in here, we can do a bunch of things. First thing that we can do is, again, we can do our name parsing, our address verification, of course, our geocoding, which is what we're going to be doing, our phone and email verification and correction. I'm not going to go through all of these because I have covered them in my past webinars, again. But in order for you to be able to do the geocoding, again, I mentioned a while ago, you need to have an address. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to base it off of anything. So what you want to do is you want to be able to map your address, your city, your state, and that's actually good enough, but I'm going to go ahead and map my zip code also. I'm going to delete all of these unnecessary columns, and I'm not going to go through these anymore. Again, I have already covered this in my past webinars, but these are all the different types of metadata you get back. Some of these might be useful for you guys. And these are all being returned by our address solution. And then I'm going to go over to my geocoding tab, and I'm basically going to click on this radio button, which tells me that I want to be able to get my latitude, longitude, and the rest of my geocoding metadata based off of the address input that I have on the previous tab. So use the results of address process from this tab. So again, it'll give me the latitude and longitude based off the address. And not just that, we get a bunch of other information here. You got county FIPS, place code and place name, time zone code, and you've got your CBSAs and your census block. So these are very useful census information and geographic information. If you want to learn more about these fields, you can actually, we have a place in our site that talks about census data and how fields are, or what fields represent what they're used for. So just some more information for you guys here. I'm just going to go ahead and press OK. That's good enough for me. I want all of those information back. I'm not going to do any phone and email verification right now. I do want to pass through some fields. I want to be able to get my input addresses or input data. And that's pretty much it. I go ahead and press OK. And as part of my output, I actually want to be able to output an Excel file. Let's go ahead and do that and map our data just like so. And again, this is a 1, 2, 3 step process where we're grabbing data from a source, we're doing some transformations on it. In this case, we're enriching the data with geocoding information based off of the address, and then we're outputting all of that information, all of our results, in an Excel spreadsheet, just so we can view it much easier. And I'm actually going to define where this file will go to. I'm going to name it GeoUS. Get rid of that extra extension. Should already have the extension here, yes. And then I'm going to go through this third tab and click on Get Fields. This will define all of my headers for the Excel file. And I'm just going to go ahead and save this guy and run it. So again, I only have 50 records here, and it's telling me that it's actually done. So this is our output file, and if we open this guy up, we can see, of course, our original input information, and it's got my, or it should have, there we go, our latitude and longitude, our CBSA information, our time zones, place code and place name, which is for, you know, cities or townships, and then our county information if you want the county FIPS or the county name itself. And again, the MSAs or the CBSAs. And then we should also have some census information here, so census block and census tract. Over here at the end, we also see a results column, and this kind of tells us the level of accuracy at which the geocoding information was coded to. Again, we saw the different levels of geocoding a while ago. We had our 9-digit level, our 5-digit zip code centroid level. We have our interpolated data, and we have our rooftop geocoding, which comes from Navteq and TomTom data. And these results tell me what level of geocoding those were put at, or these addresses were coded to. So GS05 actually means that this is rooftop geocoding based off of TomTom and Navteq data. GS06 means it's interpolated, and so on and so forth. So a lot of good information here. I mean, most of them coded either a GS05 or GS06, and if it didn't code otherwise, it would actually tell me that it coded, or at what level it actually coded to. So there you go, just you know, useful geospatial data information, including the census information, CBSAs, lats and longs for the addresses, and so on. And again, we've done that through just 3 really easy steps through Contact Zone, which is just extracting your data, putting it through our Contact Verify, and Excel output. Of course, you know, through that single run, we could have also done our name parsing. We could have also done our phone and email verification in that same run, but I didn't choose to do that right now because, again, it's not part of our current demo. So, you know, this is actually an example good for the US, and we actually do a really, really good job when it comes to geocoding for US addresses. But one thing I wanted to show you guys, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new transformation here. Um, I'm going to create a new input, or I'm going to try and find a new input for an international database. So I'm going to get fields, and I've got 5 fields in here. And this data actually has quite a few, or just a few records, and it's got international data. So we've got street addresses, cities, provinces, and postal codes coming from different countries. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get geocoding from that. And one of the things that we are actually also able to provide is we can do geocoding all over the entire world. And this is for, I would say, about 240 countries and territories. So I'm going to get the global verify component uh, from these Melissa data components, and I'm going to map the information, my international addresses, into here, and I'm going to map, again, my columns. My street address goes to my address line 1. Localities are the internet is the international term for cities. Administrative area is the international term for states or provinces. Postal codes are actually just postal codes, but we know them more to be zip codes. And of course, our country is just a country. And that's pretty much it. I'm going to leave everything else as default. Maybe just get my input fields or my pass-through fields and press OK. I'm going to output that information into an Excel spreadsheet, create my Excel file, remove the extra extension, go to my third tab, and get all the header definitions, press OK, and then save it, and then run it. So again, just 21 records here. And let's go ahead and check out the results. Geo International Excel file. So here we can see our original input information again, and then we now have our latitude and longitude information. I think longitude was put in somewhere else. Here you go. So they weren't put side by side, but again, we have both the longitude and the latitude fields here for the geocoding information. Again, we're able to do this not just for the US, but also for the rest of the world. So this component actually does other things, not just geocoding. Of course, it tried to correct my international addresses. It also verified the international addresses for me. If you're interested to learn about that, again, as part of I do cover it in one of my previous webinars, how to perform international address validation, right here. So you can go ahead and view this video if you're interested in international address validation. So that's pretty much it as far as trying to show you guys how we do geocoding. Again, it made it look really easy, and in fact, this tool is actually a very simple tool. The last thing I want to do before I let you guys go is usually at the end of my presentation, I show some other things that you can do with Contact Zone. For those of you who already use Contact Zone, at the end, again, I cover some tips and tricks, some things that aren't connected to the Melissa data quality verification routines, but more techniques for the tool itself. So right now, I just want to show you guys how to do parallel processing through this Contact Zone. So if I'm going to create a new transformation, and say, for example, I drop in, or I connect again to my sample address data and get my fields, press OK. What if I wanted to do parallel processing on this data? Say, for example, I wanted to split it into 3 and then do the same thing to it, just using 3 threads that process parallel to each other. And that's something that can be done. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and drop in 3 Excel outputs here. So what you do is you map it to the first one, and then you tell it that it's the main output for this step. And then you map it to the second Excel output, and it gives you 2 choices, whether you want to do it as a copy or you want to be able to distribute it. Now, copy makes 2 and 3 copies of the CSV file and outputs it through all of these pipes. But what I want to do is I want to distribute it. What that does is it evenly distributes these 50 records, I believe. I'm not mistaken. Yeah, these are 50 records distributed evenly among these 3 pipes. So again, I'm not really doing anything with the data, but if we wanted to do some transformations on it, like we wanted to do contact verify in each of these, wanted to get the geocoding on each of these, we could have done so, and that would have done it through 3 pipes and not just through 1 pipe. And this is significant when you're doing like millions and millions of records. If you have like 10 million records, then you probably want to make use of or split the data in maybe 4 or 5 or even 6 pipes, depending on how many CPUs you have. So this is again how you leverage multi-threading from within the contact zone environment. Go ahead and delete that and just maybe set it up. So I'm going to name this part 1, save, get the fields, okay, name this part 2, okay, get the fields, okay, and then finally do the same thing here. Oops, remove that, get the fields, and then okay, and then save this guy. Parallel processing, and then just run it. And here you'll see again the information being split evenly amongst the 3 pipes. We originally had 50 records in there, and so each of these outputs will have parts of those 50 rows. So this will have your first 17 and so on and so forth. So again, nice and easy way of just splitting out the work into 3 different pipes. Of course, you can what do you call it? You can also do a union on this later on, but that's not part of this presentation. I believe I did show how to do a union in one of my previous webinars, so just go ahead and check that out when you have some time. So that's pretty much it for me. Again, it's a really simple high-level webinar of how to do geocoding, and of course we've seen how contact zone works, and how we're able to do geocoding from within contact zone. So this is my information on the screen. Abby, are we going to take questions right now?
Yes. Thanks again, Joseph. Another great presentation. The floor is now open for questions, so if you have a question, you can type them into the interface right now. Okay, our first question is, does it run on different technologies besides contact zone?
So yeah, that's actually a pretty good question. And what I've shown you up here is just the contact zone tool itself, but we can actually provide you with the latitude, longitude, and other types of information through other types of technologies, not just through contact zone. We actually offer APIs. We have web services that you can get this lat long information from. So if you want to do real-time latitude, longitude, or getting the lat and long in real time, we have solutions for that. So not just a contact zone, we also have APIs, and we even have SSIS, SQL Server Integration Services components. So for those of you who are SQL Server users, we also have that. So
Okay, our next question is, what recommendations do you have for working with addresses in developing nations?
So this is a really good question because the thing is, when it comes to nations that are still in developing, as you would say, the quality of data that they would have. See, the way we're able to do geocoding and the way we're able to do address verification at an international level is because we have the data from the post offices from those countries. So, or maybe some third-party company that does that. But in either case, from what we've seen, of course, if it's still a developing country, if they're not like the UK or the US or maybe Canada, then the data that they have is just not going to be as good. And the coverage itself, like for example, I've seen some countries, the coverage of lats and logs is just not going to be as good. So unfortunately, you're stuck with the data that you have. You could go with you could take a look at what other countries provide or what other companies provide as far as lats and logs, but it's really not going to be as good when it comes to developing countries. And we just kind of have to wait for them to catch up with the data that they provide. So.
Okay, the next question is, how does the product handle zip codes with leading zeros truncated by Excel in CSVs?
So this is more of a technical question, but the good news is if you actually submit just 3 digits of a zip code through our web service, our web server or our service is actually smart enough to know that you're supposed to actually how do you call it? You're supposed to append the zeros at the beginning. So yeah, even if you're missing those zeros in there, we can actually append it for you, or it actually automatically tries to append it. If not, it also tries to correct that zip code information based off of the city and the state. So it doesn't just look at the zip code, it can also base it from the city and the state. So if anything's wrong with the zip code, we'll try to fix it through the city and the state. But again, if the zeros were truncated, we append it back when it comes in.
Another question is, web service plus API, is it possible with this tool?
So I don't talk about architecture with the contact zone. I did cover that in again a previous webinar of mine, but contact zone in itself, you have two primary choices. You can process the data locally through a locally API, or you could process the data through a web service, through a web call. Now, if you're using the API or the local solution, then you would have to maintain the geocoding data locally. Whereas if you use the web services, then you wouldn't have to do any maintenance on the data or the API because you are doing a web call. So yes, it's possible to do both.
Can we store the entire address lat-long dataset locally, or does it have to be hosted?
Again, this is similar to that previous question. Yes, you can store the information locally. If you're doing just the US, then you can do either way, either through a web call or through a locally, or you can host the data locally if you wanted to. But if you're going to an international scale, you actually probably don't want to store all that data. This is extremely huge data that we're talking about here. So again, if you're going international, then we do recommend that that it remains a web call and not store the data locally.
Is this webinar, here's a question. Is this webinar scheduled for other dates? And I can answer that question. I will be sending out a link to this webinar after the event, so you'll be able to listen to it again.
So yeah, we typically send out the information for the upcoming webinars. So just go ahead and wait for that. I usually do it every month around this time. So there is another question here asking for the website for the other webinars, and I'm going to just go ahead and pull that up on the screen. If you wanted to get to this, the way you would do it is, again, you would go to melissadata.com, and under the resources tab, there's webinars, which is the very first link, and you click on the webinars, and it'll show you all the past webinars for the expert series.
Is there address cleaning standardization functionality available in the web services before geocoding?
Yes, the answer is yes, and Again, this is covered in a past webinar, and I try to keep it specific to geocoding just this time. Otherwise, it will be too much information. But yes, it automatically does your address correction before doing any form of geocoding, and this is one of the things that makes this tool so powerful, is that you can put in an imperfect address, we'll correct information for you, we'll put in all of the missing information. If you're missing a zip code, we'll try and correct that. And then after we've done the correction, the validation, and the cleansing, comes the next step, which is the enrichment part of it, which contains, the Latin long information for that address, the census information, and the CVSAs, and so on. So it's basically data cleansing, data verification, and then data enrichment, which contains geocoding.
Another question, is batch processing available?
Yes, batch processing is available, and again, this is the contact zone tool is actually made for doing batches of, or made for doing processing of batches of records, as we see here.
Okay, if we didn't sign up for the past webinars, would we be able to access and open the file on the website he just showed? Usually you can only access these past webinars when you sign up.
Yeah, I realize that a lot of people who use GoToMeeting is like, it's only available for those people who signed up originally, but no, these are recordings that we host on our site, so they're publicly available to anyone who wants to access them.
Okay, that's all the time we have right now. If your question wasn't answered, Joseph can contact you after the event, or you can email him at joseph@melissadata.com. Again, thank you so much for attending our webinar. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.